Pokemon Red and Blue are over 27 years old. Which, I don't know about you, but that is an insane amount of time. But as new entries in the series come out and the passage of time goes along, certain little facts get forgotten about. So here I am today to present to you some Pokemon Red and Blue facts that you probably didn't know. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe for more. Anyway, let's get right into this. Every copy of Red, Blue, Green, or Yellow is personalized. Now this is going to sound like the Mario 64 meme, but I promise that there is some legitimacy to this story. So you know at the beginning of every new game that you start, you'll receive a trainer ID, which you can see when you click on your name, right? Well, originally that ID number would be additionally assigned to your version of the game in the form of dictating what Pokemon would be available to you in your game, as well as it was stated to be a way to set a seed for a randomized version of the Kanto region. The evidence for this being a possibility is cited in the 1996 book Pokedex, which was translated by the channel Did You Know Gaming. The interview features a neat little quote by programmer Takanori Uta, which supports this idea that every version of Generation 1 was originally meant to be more personalized than the simple color differences of either red, blue, yellow, or green. Different Cerulean Caves. You see, compared to other secrets in this game, this one focused very heavily on which version of the game you played, namely what region that game was from. As if you were to head into Cerulean Cave during the post-game of Red and Blue and you looked up the map to help yourself find a way to Mewtwo, you might be met with some inconsistencies. As if you'd accidentally pulled up the map for Red and Green, aka the Japanese releases of these games, you'd probably notice that they have very different layouts sprawling across the floors of that cave. The first floor is easily the least affected with only some minor changes, but the others are pretty unique to each other when you give them a nice look here. Yeah, if I looked this up as a kid, I definitely would have got lost. Number 3, Fishy statues. Did you know within the gyms of Pokemon Red and Blue it is entirely possible to battle and encounter water-type Pokemon as early as Vermilion City? Well, pretty much as soon as you have any of the 3 available rods in the Old Rod, Good Rod, or Super Rod, you can run on over to the statues at the start of each gym challenge and fish to your heart's content, all within the walls of a Pokemon gym. When I was a kid on the playground, I remember distinctly hearing that you could do this in Misty's gym, but it turns out you can do this in literally any one of them. Which, while it isn't absurdly useful, it is still super funny that you can rock up to Blaine's challenge and be like, hold up, I need to get this Magikarp first, fam. This glitch was later amended in Pokemon Yellow, but even still, it's very quirky and funny, so I felt like it was a good mention here. Skipping Marowak's ghost. Speedrunning is a lovely little hobby that I tend to frequent in my spare time. It's a hobby that in the case of Pokemon Red and Blue has led to some interesting discoveries, to say the very least. You see, when you're trying to complete a game as fast as humanly possible, you oftentimes as a player will use several glitches and exploits to skip over portions of the game and sometimes even entire sequences of that game. And one of the most famous examples of this in Pokemon Red and Blue is Pokédoll Skip, where you essentially, instead of battling your way through the rocket hideout to get the Silph Scope that you would typically use in Lavender Tower to fight the spirit of Cubones' mother, you instead head to Celadon Superstore and buy a Pokédoll instead. Then by using this item in battle against the ghost, it will essentially allow you to skip this fight and progress through the game without ever having to battle through all those grunts down in that rocket hideout. It's a massive time save and a really sick trick. Cubones' original name. So back in Generation 1, there were a lot of placeholder and undecided actual names for several Pokemon, and Cubone was one of them. Now, if you know Cubone's backstory, you'll be utterly heartbroken to note this little guy's original name was actually set to be Orphan, which is just about as heart-wrenching as a Pokemon's name could be. It's a simple little fact, but I thought it was a nice follow-up from the last one. Surfing Pikachu. You know, back in the days, Pokemon spin-offs meant something. And while I largely mean that as a joke, I do think that when it comes to the main games, it's really dope to have those spin-offs as it gives you something different. You know, like getting a Manaphy egg from Pokemon Ranger. However, even as early as Pokemon Yellow, they offered something super cool to trainers from its N64 spin-off, Pokemon Stadium. As if you battle and beat every single trainer in the game with your Pikachu, it will allow said Pikachu to learn the move Surf, which is otherwise unable to do. However, by transferring said Pikachu into your copy of Pokemon Yellow, it will also allow you to access this hidden surfing minigame by talking to the surfer dude in a house on Route 19. So you basically get a Pikachu that knows Surf, which it usually can't, as well as you get a cool little minigame. To me, this is genuinely such a neat little secret that I basically had to put on the list because of how cool it was. No bike needed for Cycling Road. Another little sequence break here, and let me tell you that this one shows just how annoyingly persistent us players can be at games. Now, as you'll probably know, to access the cycling road, you're supposed to have gotten the bike from the shop in Cerulean City, and if you don't, then you just can't go down it, right? Well, not exactly. As some players have found that by talking to the NPC guarding the road an ungodly amount of times and spamming B while talking to him, players have found that you can simply bypass him and head straight on down the road. And by exiting that building, of course, on the left side, you'll find yourself seated on a bike, making it so you don't even have to worry about getting the bike voucher, as you'll simply receive a bike by doing this glitch. Trapped at the start. Conversely to advancing in a very cool way like the last entry, this one doesn't really hold any practical purpose for you advancing in the game, but it's very funny nevertheless. Basically, Pokemon Red and Blue have several checks to ensure that you are progressing in the game via the intended way. As at the start, you of course receive your first Pokemon and head up to Viridian City to retrieve Oak's parcel so you can acquire the Pokedex, right? Well, there's a way to utterly break this sequence and more or less trap yourself within the first 2 towns of the game. As by leveling up your starter until it evolves in those first few patches of grass, the game will recognize the player should have a Pokedex available to them, and as a failsafe, the professor will offer one to the player when they next visit the lab. However, as you make your way back through Viridian City, you'll notice that the old man that typically teaches you how to catch Pokemon will simply not move. And the old man will simply not move and just grumble on the ground for all eternity. This is because the game registers that you have a new Pokemon in your Pokedex without you actually having a Pokedex because, your starter evolved. This breaks this early sequence in the game, so instead of teaching you how to catch a Pokemon, you just never need to learn. And without this old man moving, you'll be stuck and unable to head to Pewter and beyond there. Drunk old man. Listen, localization in games is a hell of a drug, and in the case of that old man, that drug is more of a stiff drink if you catch my drift. As when Pokemon Red and Blue were localized to the States, you'll probably remember that the story as to why this man was lying on the ground was because his head hurt and that he simply needed his morning coffee to get going. However, in the Japanese version of the game, his dialogue reads as, looks like I was pretty drunk. Which obviously indicates him being on the ground was a result of a hangover and not a lack of caffeinated beverages. I hate to say it, I'm starting to relate to that old guy though. Skipping Brock. Another quirky little sequence break involves everyone's favorite Nurse Joy and Officer Jenny loving gym leader, as there's in fact a way to skip him in the early game and come back to him later. Now, within Pewter City, you might know that a youngster will typically prevent you from going to the right out of the town and will take you directly to Brock's gym whenever you pass in front of him. But what if I told you there was a way to skip him? You see, if you stop before him on this tile, hover over the save button, then move forward while skipping his dialogue with the B button, you should be able to open up the menu and save your game. Then by resetting the game, you'll notice a weirdly distorted version of this scene will play. However, if you go back by the same area and walk through where the youngster used to be, you can completely skip Brock at this point in the game and come back to him later. It's not like you completely skip his fight or anything, as you do need his gym badge to progress through the Pokemon League, but it is a neat little way to avoid him in case you want to fight him later. Cutting down the tall grass. Now, for those of you who came up on more recent titles, you might not be privy to what an HM is. Instead of a technical machine, an HM is a hidden machine. And while the wording isn't particularly important, the differences between the two are as follows. A TM can be used only once in older titles, while an HM can be used as many times as needed. But once an HM move is learned, it can't be deleted without the use of a move deleter NPC. That said, the move Cut has a nice little hidden ability that I only learned of while researching for this video. And that ability is to be able to cut down tall grass so you don't have to worry about encountering Pokemon on any given route. It's kind of like using a repel but with a bunch of extra steps. I will say it's kind of wild that after I've played these games for well over 2 decades, I never knew this or even thought to try cutting down tall grass. But hey ho, I know now and so do you. Evolving Pikachu in Pokemon Yellow. As most of you will probably know, Pokemon Yellow is fondly remembered for the player having access to a Pikachu at the start of their Cantonian journey, following a very similar journey to that of Ash Ketchum in the anime. Which, by the way, the end of Ash's journey absolutely made me cry. That said though, one thing kept consistent between the games and the anime is that Pikachu stays outside of its Pokeball and elects to walk behind you instead. Additionally though, it can evolve using a thunderstorm like a normal Pikachu could. Very similarly, of course, to Ash's Pikachu in the anime. However, players who simply wanted a Raichu weren't satisfied with this and found a way to get what they wanted. As by simply trading this Pikachu to another game, you could very easily evolve it to Raichu without any problems and trade it back to your copy of Pokemon Yellow, making it undeniably possible to get a more powerful version of your electric starter. 190 for all to see! Pokemon's first generation has become synonymous with fans for being the OG 151s, in terms of it having arguably the most recognizable cast of Pokemon, partly due to it being the first cast of Pokemon. But do you know that originally the number of Pokemon internally listed and planned for the games was actually 190? This would have added a ton more Pokemon to the Pokedex in Red and Blue, but for better or for worse, they ended up dropping the number down to 151, and rather elected to add some of these in the decks for Pokemon Gold and Silver. I'm going to be talking more about these cut Pokemon in an upcoming video, so make sure to subscribe for that. No recharge required. Hyper Beam in the early stages of Pokemon was seen as an all-powerful move which was capable of defeating even the most dangerous of Pokemon. However, you might know that nowadays it requires a recharge and rarely if ever is worthwhile to have on a Pokemon, as there are just better options for moves. But did you know that back in Pokemon Red and Blue, if your Pokemon used Hyper Beam and either fainted an opposing Pokemon, missed, or broke a substitution, that the recharge period would be completely removed? This means that, in theory, you could essentially just rock through a whole opposing team without even having to recharge once. Now that's Hyper Beam I know, love, and remember from my childhood. Crazy critical hits. So as we know in the modern day, moves like Focus Energy and items like Dire Hit were made specifically so that you could increase a Pokemon's chances of hitting a critical. However, back in Pokemon Red and Blue, it would actually decrease a mon's chances, contrary to its intended purpose due to a coding error in the games. Namely, using a Dire Hit or Focus Energy would make a Pokemon's chance of hitting a critical 1/4 of what it previously would have been. Additionally, moves like Razor Leaf, which had an increased crit chance, would always land as criticals. Which is pretty funny, as it makes Razor Leaf in particular a 110 power grass type move with a ton of PP. Now like that, come on, get your head out of the gutter. Pikachu's Redesign. Now, while most people will know of Pikachu's gradual redesign over the years, consisting of it going from a chunky little mouse to a skinny, speedy mascot which we see today, most people don't actually know about its proposed redesign by Nintendo America. You see, back in Pokemon's early days, Nintendo America showed off some select ideas they had to redesign popular mons like Charizard and Pikachu. Tsunekazu Ishihara, the president of the Pokemon Company, wasn't exactly happy with these proposed changes and refused to allow them. Quote, they turned Pikachu into something like a tiger with big breasts. It looked like a character from the musical Cats. And when I asked how it was meant to be Pikachu, they said, well, look, its tail's right there. End quote. I wasn't able to find any of the actual concept designs on the internet, but here's how a friend of mine envisioned how this could and would have looked. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, I think Pikachu looks better the way it is. The Mew prank. Mew is inarguably the mythical Pokemon of all time. It set the standard and idea for what a mythical is, and oddly enough, it actually wasn't even meant to do that. You see, after the debug features were removed from the original games, it freed up just enough space on the cartridges to store another Pokemon, which would be completely unobtainable as there was no programmed encounter set for the Pokemon. So Shigeki Morimoto decided to add in the mon as something of a prank. However, through the use of several glitches, you can actually acquire Mew in the game. Mew would later be distributed for events, but within the confines of the game, there is no way to acquire the original Mew outside of using a neat little series of exploits to acquire the funky fetus cat Pokemon. And those were some Pokemon Red and Blue facts that you probably didn't know. Which one of these was your favorite and which one didn't I mention? Let me know in the comments down below. And hey, while you're headed down that way, if you did enjoy the video, it would mean the world if you'd leave the video a like and maybe consider subscribing for more content like this in the future. Personally, this video got me really interested in learning the Pokemon Red and Blue speedrun, so I think I'm gonna dip and go start learning. As always though, I hope you stay safe and be bold, and I will talk to you soon. Bye bye.